I'm Corey Johnson, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, a disturbance in the forest at Disney. We'll break down the first quarter earnings for the House of the Mouse. Plus, 2 days before it reports earnings, Twitter cracks down and announces a crackdown on hate and harassment. And meeting the makers. We're live this hour from the 2017 Makers Conference. We've got AOL CEO Tim Armstrong and BBG Ventures Susan Lin ahead. But first to our lead. Disney shares dipping in after hours. The company reporting its first quarter sales fell short of analyst estimates. Revenue shrank 3% year over year, just about $15 billion. A profit decline at ESPN, which had lower viewership. Those numbers not great, dragging down the results of their cable operations. But the one bright spot, theme parks, a $1 billion profit, 13% higher than a year ago. Joining us right now, Paul Sweeney from New York. He's our Bloomberg Intelligence Director. And Paul, we look at these quarters. I just got off of the Bloomberg Radio talking to Geeta Raghunathan, who covers Disney for us. And her take was that these numbers weren't terrible, but they weren't super strong.
Yeah, they really weren't. They were, I guess we'll be charitable and call it a mixed bag here. So, I think what Disney has really set up the street for is to say, listen, fiscal 17, which they just completed their first quarter, is going to be a tough profit growth quarter for them for a couple of reasons. Number one, the NBA contract at ESPN. That's a new contract. That's $600 million of expenses. That's very tough cost comparisons for the company to deal with. And then secondarily, on the filmed entertainment business, they're only going to release 7 films this year. They typically release about 11 films, so the comparisons in the film business are going to be difficult as well. So, and then, of course, we've got some of the challenges at ESPN that is dealing with subscriber losses and the challenges that impacts on their affiliate fee revenue and their advertising revenue. The company's suggesting, however, if you look past 2017, you get into 2018, then, of course, the cost comparisons at ESPN are going to be a lot easier. They're going to have 11 films in 2018, including 4, I think, from Marvel, a couple from Star Wars, and just, and 3 animation films. So, they're trying to set people up to look out to 2018. If you look at the stock today, it's only down a couple of percent on some pretty mixed numbers. So that's suggesting that I think the street, at least for the near term, is willing to give the company the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, it seems the stock sold off after hours and picked up a little bit. I wonder when we look at that, if we expect, is it just about comps, or is it really that this business is working? Because it has been a pretty remarkable story over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what was a little bit disappointing this quarter was that the company did disappoint a little bit on the revenue line. And, that really calls into question probably the number one concern for Disney investors, and that is the cable network business, principally ESPN. And, when you start to lose subscribers, where you see it in the business is on your revenue line, because you have lower advertising revenue and lower affiliate fee revenue. And on a fixed cost business like ESPN, where you're locked into long-term contracts with the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball, that is not a good profit outlook. So investors for Disney are really sensitive to the top line because a lot of the costs of this company, particularly at its cable networks, are fixed in nature.
Disconcerting too. Are they losing these subscribers because to ESPN and so on from cord cutting? Is that the reason for the loss? Because that would be really disconcerting, because it seems like a trend and not just a one-time thing.
Yeah, it really does. And they kind of highlighted this trend back in the summer of 2015, and that really spooked the media stocks in general and Disney in particular. So we do know that cord cutting is occurring. All the cable networks are experiencing about a 1% to 2% decline in their subscribers every year, including ESPN. So that's a fundamental issue that all the cable networks have to deal with. The question is, do they get some of those subscribers back in some of these skinny bundles, or maybe going by direct to the consumer with a OTT service like HBO Now? So are they going to get some of those subscribers back that are leaving the big bundle? That is a little bit uncertain right now. So I think investors are pretty sensitive to those subscriber numbers and to the revenue numbers coming out of the cable networks.
We've got some sound from Bob Iger on the call. Check out what Iger had to say, and I'll get your reaction after we hear that.
I've been with this company for 43 years, and I've actually been CEO for almost a dozen years. And I'm going to do what's in the best interest of this company, which is something the board's clearly going to help determine. And while I'm confident that my successor is going to be chosen on a timely basis and chosen well, if it's in the best interest of the company for me to extend my term, I'm open to that.
Well, listen, I just jumped off that earnings call myself to come on here, and I can tell you, I'm probably speaking for most people on that call when they would say Bob Iger can stay as CEO as long as he wants. So I suspect that he will stay until the board really finds somebody either internally or externally that could fill his very big shoes. But, the challenge for this company is they do not have a very good succession plan in place right now. They had one and it identified two strong candidates, but at the 11th hour, they were not able to agree on Tom Staggs as the ultimate heir apparent. So here we are, and it's a little bit uncertain and uncharted territory. The good news is that Bob Iger will stay on until they can right the ship from a succession perspective.
I like him personally. I'm a friend of his wife's, but he's done just such an incredible job as CEO of that company, really the gold standard there. Hey, I want to ask you about another company, Twitter. Twitter is one of the issues that's bothered Twitter for quite a while is this issue of sort of cyberbullying, abusive tweets, and so on. And I wonder what you think it means for their business. It's good of them to start to crack down on this in new ways, I suppose. But I wonder, just from a business standpoint, what you make of this, and does it really matter? Should we care if we look at it either as an investment or as a business?
I think this is a move they had to make from a business perspective for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have to try to grow their user base, and to the extent that it is perceived as somewhat of a hostile platform, I think they needed to address that issue because one of the key issues for this company is to try to increase their user base. If you increase their user base, then you increase advertising, and advertisers want to make sure that their messages are being displayed in a hospitable environment. So I think this is something they kind of had to do from a user experience as well as an advertising perspective. And then one could even make the argument that they had to make this move because to the extent they ever want to sell themselves to another company, say a Disney, for example, they need to clean up their act a little bit in terms of some of the content that's on their platform.
And so should we expect a revenue impact? I mean, this might actually help them make more money?
I don't think the street is buying off on it. This is very, very much a wait-and-see situation for Twitter. The company has tried a number of product enhancements, a number of technology enhancements to try to make it easier to attract new users. We just have not seen it in the user number. So this is very much a company that's going to have to deliver before the street will buy off on it.
Paul Sweeney, Director of Bloomberg Intelligence, thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, well, coming up, we're talking to Susan Line, venture investor at BBG Ventures, coming live from the Makers Conference right after this.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it.
This year's Makers Conference currently underway in Palos Verdes, California. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde standing by with BBG Ventures' Susan Line in sunny Southern California. Caroline, maybe not so much.
It's great to see you, Corey. Yes, and it is just the sun is peeking out here at the Makers Conference. I'm joined by, of course, Susan Line, currently president of BBG Ventures. That's built by Girls Ventures. It's a fund that's backed by AOL. But prior to that, well, she was heading up the brands of AOL.com. TechCrunch, many of our viewers will know, it's same as Engadget as well. She was there as the CEO of AOL Brand Group. And before that, she really was a tech entrepreneur herself. You, of course, was CEO of Gilt Group. That's all about flash sales, e-commerce. Susan, great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about the state of female entrepreneurship at the moment. Where does it stand in the current political, economic environment?
Well, the good news here is that women are starting companies at an extraordinary rate. We've seen 1,400 companies with a female founder since we started BBG Ventures 2.5 years ago. And obviously, that's not all of them, right?
Yeah.
This is a very fertile arena right now. The problem is that the VC world, the legacy VC world, still does not have the networks that reach into this female entrepreneur base. And so women are still getting only about 10% of the venture capital that goes to startups in this country. We looked at that and said that's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? If women are the dominant consumers, and there are more and more women who are coming out of not just engineering schools, but B schools and coming out of companies where they've got real vertical expertise. We should be backing the best of these because they understand that end user.
What will be the tipping point for VCs to be able to start seeing this sort of talent coming into their own hemisphere and Because the data already proves that if you're an S&P 500 company, well, tends to be if it's female-led, it's outperforming the rest of the S&P 500. Right. What is the data not showing to the typical VC right now?
You know, I think it's less about what the data shows, because a lot of these companies are still very early stage.
Yeah.
It takes 5 years, 8 years, 10 years for a company to really show what it can become. But I think what you're seeing is that there's at least a recognition that they need to open up their partnerships. And several of the most storied VCs, Sequoia, for example, just brought in their first female partner.
But just now?
What
took so long?
You know, I think it's been a world where it's understandable on a certain level. You know, most of the early startups were selling to large technology companies. They were enterprise plays, and so being able to talk to the guys working at those companies was important. But as the world changes and as technology becomes a part of every company, there's just a bigger world out there and a bigger opportunity.
What we have seen a lot, particularly in Silicon Valley, is a lot of the key startups have been led by immigrants as well.
Yes.
How are you seeing the Trump travel ban coming into play? How much is that affecting also female immigrants as well? Is that how much of a pool in your own fund are we seeing come from outside the United States?
Well, we only invest in companies that are U.S.-based, but there are certainly plenty of founders who have come to this country to go to university, really, and stayed, and they're starting companies now. And so there's no question that this particular sector, the startup world, technology startups, would be impacted dramatically by this ban.
You've spoken a lot also throughout the election cycle that perhaps there was an echo chamber, as has been voiced by many, within social media. Are you now starting to see social media attack this problem? Do you think that they're becoming accountable?
I think that that everyone, whether they wanted to take responsibility for the outcome of the election or not, I know for a fact that every company really looked hard at what their current policies were, how they could make sure that the echo chambers were opened up if that was a problem, and all of them have gone after the fake news problem as well. So I think that there's nobody is being cavalier about this. It's a problem that everybody recognized, and I think they're all doing a pretty good job of trying to find solutions for it.
We're sat here at the Makers Conference. We can hear the music, the shouting behind us of more than 500 women. It's all about leadership and storytelling within that. It feels optimistic here. Are you optimistic about the talent pool that is currently coming through? Are the STEM subjects being adopted by US youth at the moment to feed the talent pool you want to invest in?
You know, I'm optimistic about a lot of things. I'm very optimistic about this conference. You know, everybody talked about it coming in as the meeting after the march. And if you were in D.C. or in any of a number of cities around the country, it was such a spectacular day. It was one of those days that remind you of how much progress has been made and what a unified group women in the United States are, and actually women around the world right now. And the message was very simple: we're not going back, right? So I think what an event like this is great for is to get people really thinking about what's that mean in practice. What are the things we need to do going forward to make sure that our daughters have even more opportunity. And certainly in this area of entrepreneurship where you can create your own company, that's key. It's an arena that we need more women in. Women are natural problem solvers. So you take any consumer problem out there, and there's a woman, I promise you, who is working on a solution for it. Being able to find ways for more women to understand how to use technology in order to solve problems and then getting more VCs, more investors interested in supporting this next generation of women to do that is great.
More competition for Built by Girls Ventures, which,
Yes.
of course, he currently leads. Susan Line there, talking solutions. And we'll be speaking, of course, to none other than Tim Armstrong of AOL, who's been helping focus on the equal pay and other areas that can be a force for promotion of women as well. Corey, handing it to you in the studio.
Great stuff with Susan Line. Thank you very much. Caroline Hyde at the Makers Conference in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. All right, shocking news from Autodesk. Longtime CEO Carl Bass is leaving the company, but first, he's here to talk to us right after this break. This is Bloomberg. Big shakeup at Autodesk, the design-focused software company, announcing that CEO Carl Bass is stepping down after 11 years as CEO. But he's not the only one heading for the exit. Two board members appointed by activist investors also on their way out the door. Carl Bass joins us right now for an exclusive talk. I told you I got a text earlier this morning from a friend at Autodesk saying you were out. What's up?
Oh, I've been working on this plan for a while. Just seemed like a great time. You know, I've been doing this job for a while. I've been coming and seeing you for like the last 14 years.
We'll call it 6 years, but okay.
Yeah. So it's been a while, and this was kind of in the works for a while, and so this is a long-term plan.
So these activist investors were asking for some changes. It's been a very contentious time. You've been in the midst of making some big changes in the business as well, and it seems like they finally started to see that your plan was working.
Yeah, I think they, as well as all the rest of the investment community. I don't know what the exact number is, but if you look at the stock performance over the last year, our stock is probably up 60, 70%.
44.26% tells us the Bloomberg.
12 months?
12 months.
Okay.
Yeah. 44.26. That's good.
Okay, 44. Not
no,
bad.
my bad. Sorry, that's the wrong company. eBay. Before we get crazy here, you were right. And in fact, we look at the long-term chart here, going back to when you started the company. The stock's up 98.5%.
Yeah, come on, Corey, help me out. help me out a little bit with my storytelling.
Yes.
No, so I think the activist investors, as well as the rest of the investment community, look, they came along, kind of at the trough when things were at its worst as we were going through this business model transition. The company was kind of vulnerable. And I think we've proven out over the last, 12 to 15 months that we had a good, solid plan. We're executing it. Things are going well. They figured they could move on. I had been planning on leaving. When they showed up, I decided it was not a really good time to leave, and stable leadership through this period would be helpful.
Yes, and again, that full 1 year return is from the 8th of February, a year ago, till the end of today, is actually 95%.
Yeah,
which is a pretty good number.
Yeah, so I think investors are happy, but more importantly than the day-to-day returns is the fact that the plan, and it was a long-term plan, and it was a big change in the business, and the other important thing that we've been doing is moving all of our engineering software to the cloud.
Right, and that's an enormous change, and you've seen some companies kind of left by the roadside as they've not made that change well.
Yeah, I think whenever you look at a technology platform transition, whether it's mainframes to workstations or Windows comes or mobile in the cloud, that's when companies, particularly incumbents in a strong position, get left behind. Their strength becomes their weakness. And in this case, I think we moved early. We moved, decisively. Some people thought we were kind of being rash, investing so much ahead of it. But I think it's, it's been borne out by the results.
And yet you're still seeing this sort of revenue decline here. Do you think that we're going to be in an atmosphere where we're going to see revenues across the board in software lower because people aren't paying as much because it's being offered in a sort of different way? No,
I think in our case, I can speak specifically about that. It's because we moved from a perpetual license to a subscription business. So we now have an annual subscription, which means over the course of 3 to 4 years, customers pay more, but the upfront payment is lower. And that's why the financials look worse in the short term. Right. But if you were to look at the balance sheet alongside of it, you see that money's moved really to the other side. Exactly. Of course. I also wonder, too, if you see, it seems that, to me at least, that you guys, maybe because you're right across the street and I keep an eye on the company, that you've offered a lot of new products along the way that really take advantage of some things that you can do in the cloud that you couldn't do before, that open you up to a lot bigger markets. Yeah, and when you think about it, the thing to always do when you get this opportunity is not to repeat your last act in this new way. Don't take the old, the old idea and do it on the new platform. Think, what could you possibly do that's different than what's been done before? What customer problems can you solve? And I think we've done a good job. So, in the world of construction, we've taken things out to the job site that weren't there. In manufacturing, we've enabled supply chains around the world to collaborate. We've talked about it before. Our move into additive manufacturing is being really disruptive.
3D printing.
Yeah, 3D printing. So those are the kind of things that are going to change. And so we looked at it and said, what can we do differently? Now, not what can we do the same way in a kind of new medium.
Really quickly, lots of CEOs when they leave say, I'm going to spend more time with my family. Not you.
Well, I wrote a note to the troops this morning and I said, the first thing that presumes is that your family wants to spend more time with you. And I kind of joked that I'm going to be spending a lot more time in my studio and we're working with my robots.
So more time with your robots, good for you. I know we'll see more time at Cactus.
Yes, I'll see you at the local taqueria.
We'll see you in the neighborhood. All right. Carl Bass, congratulations on a great run. And thanks for coming by today. We really appreciate it, especially today because I know you're really busy. Outgoing CEO Carl Bass is about to be not so busy. We hope get some spare time. All right, coming up, AOL CEO Tim Armstrong live from the Makers Conference. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with the check of your first word news. The Speaker of the UK House of Commons has apologized to his counterparts for overstepping his authority after announcing yesterday that President Trump would not be allowed to address the British Parliament. John Bercow agreed he should have consulted upper house lawmakers before issuing the ban, but maintains he was right to bar Trump from speaking during his state visit. A video uploaded by a rebel-run media outlet showed the aftermath of several airstrikes today that hit the rebel-held Syrian city of Idlib. The attacks are among the most intense since a ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey went into effect on December 30th. Russia denies its warplanes launched those attacks. President Vladimir Putin and German Chancellor Angela Merkel have called on Ukrainian troops and separatist rebels to cease fire in eastern Ukraine. It is their first phone call since a flare-up in hostilities killed more than 33 people last week, the worst violence in the region since 2015. The UN says some 30,000 people have returned to neighborhoods retaken from the Islamic State group in Mosul. It was taken hostage in the summer of 2014. Iraqi forces declared the eastern half of the city fully liberated last month. The western half of Mosul, home to an estimated 750,000 people, is still held by the militants. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Tuesday here in New York, 6:30 already Wednesday morning in Hong Kong. I'm joined by Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin with a look at the markets. Good morning to you, Rosalind.
Thanks, Elisa. Well, let's start in New Zealand, where the NZX is trading kind of flat. I think it looks like investors are kind of looking for direction so far in trade this morning. And they're also looking ahead to tomorrow, where there is a central bank decision expected as well. Now, looking to the futures, looking a little bit mixed. Japan looks like it's pointing to a slightly higher open, but Australia possibly flat or a little bit lower. Now, talking of Japan, we actually have some data out today. So we have a BOP current account balance expected later this morning. It's likely to show the surplus narrowed slightly, but overall there probably will be a little change from the figures from November to December. We've also got India's central bank expected to make a decision on rates. Now, that is expected to actually show a cut of 0.25% to 6%. Inflation is low, should give the central bank a little bit of room to maneuver there. And on the corporate world, we're expecting results from Rio Tinto, SoftBank, and also ICICI Bank from India. I'm Rosalind Chin here in Hong Kong. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology, and I'm Corey Johnson. The top story this hour, Disney earnings. Shares down about 1% in extended trading. Interestingly, there's some weakness in the ESPN business, showing falling viewership and higher fees being paid to the NBA. The weaker results dragged down revenue in the cable TV business, by far Disney's largest. Executives had suggested to investors that fiscal 2017 would see modest earnings growth. Wasn't all bad news. Theme park profits up 13% to over $1 billion. CEO Bob Iger also confirming that he will remain with the company beyond his scheduled June 2018 retirement if it's good for Disney. Let's head back to our live coverage from the Makers Conference underway in Palos Verdes, California. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde standing by with AOL CEO Tim Armstrong. Caroline?
I am indeed, Corey. And of course, just a little bit from his bio, of course, CEO of AOL helped steer the acquisition of Verizon, $4.4 billion. Senior executive of Google, he's got tech in his back pocket as well, and even co-founded a newspaper in Boston. So media, you're across the spectrum, Tim. But I want to, first of all, really hit what you're announcing here at this female leadership conference. You're aiming for 50-50 in terms of female to male executives. How do you go about imposing that?
Well, you know, this journey started for us 6 years ago when we really co-founded with Dylan McGee Makers as a brand, and it was our first real investment in the women's leadership space. And you know, we want to not just be an investor in the media side of Makers, and there's 4,500 women's stories on Makers, the largest catalog online of women's leadership stories. We also want to lead as a company in the space, and I think it was clear to us. We did a meeting with our executives and our up-and-coming women executives, and they asked us, I said, there's one thing that we could do as a company that would really send a message and be great for the company also. They said, could we get to 50-50 gender diversity at the top of the company, in the top 1,000 positions, you know, in the company? And so we discussed it. We made a commitment to it. We announced it on stage here about an hour ago. And we're in the process right now. We started a couple months ago of kind of getting the company reestablished in our recruiting and our internal employee development and the future. So by 2020, we really want to be 50-50 across the board in our executive team and in the top management of the company. And it's a bold goal, but we're going to figure out how to do it.
And equal pay by 2020. Give us, if you're an entrepreneur who's watching, a business leader, the step-by-step approaches you need to achieve that.
Yeah, so we've diagnosed the issues we have around it. And I think, one, it starts outside the company with what I would call pools, where we're getting the talent from in different talent pools. So we need to reconnect our recruiting efforts into broader pools, and in some cases, pools we're not in today. So if I just went to the company and said, hey, we want to be 50-50 by 2020, and I just said, get going, let's go faster, we'd go to the same pools. We have to change what we're doing. So we've been rewiring the pools recruiting. And second is having the environment at the company. When you come in to interview, we have to represent what you think the company is in the space and what we're going to be doing. So if you're a female executive coming in, part of the interview process should be you're meeting with female executives and getting that side of the story from us in terms of why you'd want to come. And the last piece is just the internal employee development process, which is if you are diverse talent, if you're a female executive and you want to move your career along in general, we actually have to put the fundamental steps in place, which we've been doing to do that. So our plan over the next 2 or 3 years is to really put an investment, just like we bought the Huffington Post or did the TechCrunch deal or those things. We're going to do a deal around this issue, and that's what we announced on stage today. We're serious about it. Just like any other startup issue you deal with, we're going to figure out how to do it, and our employees are very engaged in it and excited about it.
Talk to me about another deal, the Yahoo deal. How optimistic, pessimistic, frustrated are you by the timeline as it stands?
Yeah, so first, let me start with the Yahoo brand and the Yahoo talent. I think that the Yahoo brand remains a brand that we care about, and many people care about in the world. The talent there, we've had a great experience with them in the integration process over the last 6 months.
And that's still going well, the integration?
The integration process has been on track. You know, they've had the data breaches there, and so the deal sits right now as we're waiting for information to come back from Yahoo about the second data breach and to figure out if there's any changes in value to the deal.
Timeline on that?
You know, I think it's ongoing right now. I wouldn't want to give a timeline, but you know, I'd assume during Q1 we'll probably have a lot more information from them, and once we have that, then we can sit down and discuss with them in a really coherent way, you know, next steps in terms of what the outcome should be. And it's too early to have that discussion. I'm hopeful the deal closes. I think we really have a high appreciation for Yahoo overall. We just need to figure out whether or not there's been value changes, you know, based on the breaches. That's really how simple it is.
The driver for Yahoo is to bring on more web users, to be a powerhouse, to become the number 3 player. When you're looking at mobile advertising, Facebook and Google dominate the space. How are you going to be the number 3 player? Can you be?
Sure, yeah, we bring something unique to the table. First of all, Google and Facebook in our world are gold medal athletes. They are performing well, they're executing well. You saw their recent numbers. They've done a very good job, and they continue to do a good job. The one space that we want to be an Olympic athlete in and we want to be a gold medalist is in the brand space. And we really, the same way Google cares about search and Facebook cares about social, we care about brand. And as you've noticed on the social networks with fake news and things like that, and in the search space where people have really been, it's going to more AI than it is user-directed search, brands become a really important role. So we want to be owners and partners in content brands, and we want to have a brand advertising system which really helps find new consumers for customers and push them all the way through the conversion funnel. But if I said to you simply, Facebook is social, Google is search, we're going to be brand. Everything we're doing at the company is around brand, and we're really excited about the future of advertising and brand for digital because it hasn't really been cracked yet, and we're probably one of the 2 or 3 companies in the world furthest ahead on it.
And Makers is one of those key brands. Tim, it's been wonderful having you here.
Thank you for having me. It's good to have you over in the US also.
It's a joy. I'm loving it. 3 more months there. Tim Armstrong, thank you so much. It's been great speaking to the CEO of AOL, Corey.
We're all loving it. Yes, good stuff. Thank you, Caroline and Tim. All right, coming up now, 120 companies have lined up against President Trump as San Francisco continues to be the epicenter of the fight against the travel ban. All the latest developments next. This is Bloomberg. Facebook expanding paid leave for its employees facing family hardship. At the Makers Conference, Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, spoke about why.
This is personal for me. I lost my husband very suddenly, almost 2 years ago. Facebook provided leave. I was able to take it, and flexibility, which I needed. And now we're doing even more.
The new bereavement policy will allow for up to 20 days in the case of an immediate family member's death and up to 10 days for extended family. Well, San Francisco has become ground zero for the debate over President Donald Trump's immigration policy. The ban's currently on hold with San Francisco's 9th Circuit Court of Appeals deciding its fate. We continue to wait at that decision. But in addition, leaders from the tech sector are among the first and most outspoken critics of President Trump's executive order. The latest move counts now up to 120 companies signing a legal brief opposing that order. Google parent Alphabet is organizing the funding for this fight. Joining us right now to talk about that, Bloomberg Technology's Mark Millian and our Supreme Court reporter Greg Stohr also with us from Washington. Mark, let me start with you. Google's role in this is really remarkable. I guess over the weekend, one of the CEOs and founders of Google, Sergey Brin, was himself. His family fled Soviet oppression. He was a refugee. Now we have Google here in the United States to thank for that. He was there at the airport protesting in person, but also backing this, helping this legal strategy.
Yeah. Google's been playing an outsized role in helping to coordinate the funding and is working with a bunch of companies to bring in to sort of like help organize this brief. And as you mentioned, Sergey Brin has been a vocal opponent of the immigration order, and they had a big walkout protest at the Google campus last week that he participated in and spoke at. And so Google's, really taking a principled stance.
It's really remarkable, too, just to see corporate America involved in politics in such a big way here.
Yeah, and it's not just Silicon Valley, which traditionally skews liberal, but you're also seeing, the biotech industry, which we did a story on today in Bloomberg, is really taking a strong stance against this because the scientists that are developing some of the drugs that are saving humanity, many of them are coming from outside this country and coming to companies like Allergan to develop them here.
Now, of course, there is the legal battle, too. It's not just the sort of meta issue of who's getting involved, but these are actual nuts and bolts of it. Greg Stohr, let me turn to you. Let's say that there's going to be a decision of some kind out of the court, perhaps today, which would mean in the next couple of hours, or perhaps tomorrow. But either way, this looks like it might be headed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so actually, just a few minutes ago, the appeals court said not going to have a ruling today, probably this week, however. And yes, I would think that the losing side will go to the Supreme Court. Now, it may not be a full-blown, please hear this case. It more likely will just be, please intervene and issue an order saying that this ban can go back into effect temporarily or to stop this ban temporarily. But yes, one way or another, there's a good chance the Supreme Court will be involved in the next few days.
a Supreme Court that has only 8 members.
It does have only 8 members. So what will probably happen is that if say the administration loses at the Ninth Circuit, they'll go to the Supreme Court and they'll need 5 of those 8 justices to agree with them to temporarily stop this ban. Ultimately, the court probably sometime in the next few months will take up the issue of the constitutionality of this order or a similar order and whether the president has power under the immigration laws to do this. And there's a good chance we'll have a 9-justice court for that. But for the time being, we just have the 8 justices.
Does it matter, Greg, how the Ninth Circuit here in San Francisco frames whatever their decision is?
It does. The technical question, the narrow question that's before the Ninth Circuit right now is just whether to put a hold on this nationwide order that has halted this travel ban. The court doesn't have to go beyond that. It doesn't have to say whether this ban is constitutional and in accordance with the immigration laws. But it could go there in the course of its ruling. That would be more sweeping. That would make it more likely the Supreme Court would feel the need to get involved earlier in the case.
And also give the companies who are behind this or joining this fight more time to draft their support of it and even seek their support of it.
Right. It's showing no signs of slowing down. Just this morning, it was more than 200 startup founders and VCs got together and signed an open letter, which is becoming a thing that to sort of oppose the immigration.
What's an open letter?
An open letter, which essentially means very little because they're not actually joining a legal fight, but they're voicing their opposition together, saying that this is not something that we believe in.
So it means something.
It's
such a cynic,
stance.
Mark Millian. No, I do think it's really interesting here too because there is a sense of creating a movement. Right, and that seems to be interesting. That businesses and technology companies in particular are not just making that easy because of the technology platforms like Facebook and Twitter and something, but also actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Right. It is sort of interesting to see. These companies often there's this sort of like religion of the platform within Silicon Valley where they want to remain neutral and they want to be seen as a place for both sides to engage in discourse, which has been a Facebook stance. But now even the executives of Facebook are taking a very much political stance against this immigration order, which has been a key part of Trump's platform.
Mark Millian, thank you very much from Bloomberg Technology, Bloomberg News. Thank you, as well as Greg Storr, who covers the Supreme Court for us in D.C. Let's get more reaction on the travel ban. I hear from someone who's worked for years to bring tech jobs and workers into the U.S. under President Obama. Caroline Hyde spoke with the former U.S. Chief Technology Officer and former Googler Megan Smith at the Makers Conference about the restrictions and what it means for luring talent to the U.S.
We need to keep the pressure on and make sure that we can welcome great talent to our shores at all times like we always have through history. And it's critically important. Really, our opportunity is here. Technology, it's the time we did the artificial intelligence work for the president. And so it's becoming a time of automation, and we really need everybody, both the training and extraordinary work that's starting to happen. 35 coal miners just graduated from Code Boot Camp in Eastern Kentucky. So what are we doing to get Americans to have the kind of talent? And we did a huge amount of work around that with active, fun STEM engagement, computer science for all. 9 out of 10 parents want coding taught at school. Let's get it done, and we're getting it done. Some of the governors, very bipartisan. And then also continue to welcome the talent. So it's a two-play. Lift all Americans and bring everybody, and pay attention in the smart way to how we're reviewing, and Homeland Security and those guys have tremendous programs where we review those coming in a way that's very, they're really capable agencies, and we just need to continue to advance the field how we do that, not ban people.
Yes, because some of the concerns is also switching now to potentially executive orders on visas, particularly the H-1B visa, but a lot of concerns have been raised about the way in which those visas were deployed. Are they being used in the right way? Are there more efficient ways in which we could be bringing in the top talent to the United States?
I think that's going well. One of my favorite, we could do even more. We're working on a modernized entrepreneur visa. Many countries have that. You see that in Britain, you see that in Canada, other places. We need to do that. We want to have those entrepreneurs making companies, making jobs here. We also, the Department of Labor, which I always think we should call Labor and Talent, they did a great program where $135 million of the fees from those visas was used for grant making to states using on tech card to help them accelerate. Albuquerque, 4 counties represent half of the population of New Mexico. They're accelerating veterans, accelerating people coming out of prison, foster care, those with disabilities, others straight into this tech sector. You really see people go from $10 an hour to $60,000, $85,000 a year in 3 months. That's a real thing. And so exciting to see 70 different regions and growing who are making that ecosystem work with employers, training, and bringing people who have stereotypes about, oh, I don't do that tech job. Well, sure you do. Welcome in. And we have to do that because AI and automation will really drive our economic transformation, and so we need to get ready.
That was Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde and former U.S. Chief Technology Officer Megan Smith. On Wednesday, former AOL CEO Steve Case joins Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Make sure to catch that conversation at 7:30 in the morning. And coming up, the rivalry between Jawbone and Fitbit is on. A court battle that's now turned criminal between these wearable companies. This is Bloomberg. The wearables battle is getting interesting, a contentious fight indeed between the companies of Fitbit and Jawbone. A fascinating legal battle here going on. Selena Wang joins us right now, has been writing about this, wrote a great story in Bloomberg today about this. Now, Fitbit shares have been just down a lot, really, for sales issues, but they've succeeded fantastically in the marketplace. Their competitor Jawbone suing them, 3 employees leave, they get sued, but the case is getting really weird and now criminal.
Yeah, the case is just getting uglier and uglier. It's been dragging out for a while. It started back in May 2015 when this trade secrets case started. Jawbone said that Fitbit had hired and plundered and pilfered and gotten secret information from Jawbone, and it had gone through the International Trade Commission. It was thrown out of the ITC, and 5 months ago, Jawbone started opening this. They went to the Department of Homeland Security and Justice to open a criminal grand jury investigation into this, which really escalates. It shows that Jawbone's like, no, we're not backing down. Just because part of this case got thrown out at the ITC, we are not stopping. We're going to actually.
Well, let's unpack this a little bit because I'm getting confused. That's not hard, but it's easy to confuse me. They went to these 3 employees. They leave Jawbone. They go to Fitbit.
5 employees. Actually.
5 employees. Okay. They go to Fitbit. Jawbone goes to the ITC for this case. That seems really strange to me, not to the criminal courts. If it's the theft of secrets. That seems really unusual to me.
I think it's quite often that it does go into the ITC. They do deal with a lot of this patent stuff. I spoke to a few lawyers that said it was actually pretty unusual that they went to the criminal courts for this. They had to have brought them some compelling evidence to go through this whole grand jury process. And it's interesting, the timing of this. Usually grand jury cases are not made public, and this was kind of mentioned in passing in this filing that just came out. And this filing was basically Jawbone's opposition to Fitbit wanting to throw out this trade secrets case. They're saying, no, we think that this should still be investigated. And on top of that, we've actually escalated this to the criminal status, and there's actually been a grand jury investigation going on for the past 5 months. And Fitbit says that they're complying with it. They say that this is all just completely false and ridiculous, and Jawbone's just in deep financial trouble, and this is their way to get some money back.
And I talked to Jawbone. They wouldn't give a comment, but Fitbit says, hey, the ITC already looked at this, and they said there was no trade secret theft. The Jawbone side says, well, look, there were 335,000 digital documents that these employees had in their possession that had to be given back to Jawbone.
Right. I mean, as one of my sources said, the only people really making money out of this is the lawyers.
Shocker! The lawyers are winning.
The lawyers are winning from all of this. It's just, I mean, it's a really tough time for the wearable space. And if this was a booming, growing industry, they could probably settle their differences and get over it. But because of the market conditions, they're still fighting and fighting and fighting. And Jawbone's, really deep in this legal case, and they're probably like, we want to continue this out and hopefully get a payout from this. When it's a criminal probe, it's really escalating.
And Fitbit's IPO gave them the deep pockets to probably go after this good stuff. Selena Wang, reporter of Bloomberg Technology. Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Remember, all the episodes of Bloomberg Technology now live streamed on Twitter, or the Twitter, as I like to say. It's at Bloomberg Tech TV. Weekdays, 5 o'clock in New York, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. That's it for now. This is Bloomberg.